Hello my disciples, Father Andrew here. For today's episode of Character Cross Section, we're going to be talking about the Henchman from Hotline Miami 2. Starting with elaboration on who he is, the Henchman is one of the only two Russian mobster characters who you can play as in Hotline Miami 2. Those two being the Henchman who's been already mentioned and the Son. The Son being the leader of the Russian Mafia in Hotline Miami 2. Anyway, getting into who he is. The Henchman is a bald, darker skinned man with light blue eyes that are near cyan colour, who wears a standard Russian mob uniform, albeit he wears a teal coloured t-shirt instead of the usual cyan. The Son also wearing the same outfit, which is used to denote a higher status in the Mafia's ranks. Appearance wise, his darker skin tone appears to be a tan, as it's very similar to the ones the Russian troops have when Beard is fighting them in Hawaii in 1985, implying he may have served in Hawaii at the time. Moving on to his playstyle, the Henchman starts his only level, No Mercy, with a silenced pistol. The very first floor of this level is set up in a way where it can be beaten if you land every single shot and don't miss a single one. It's also earning the player an achievement in the Steam version of Hotline Miami 2. This level also has a unique starting weapon in the form of a light green skateboard which can be found immediately by the entrance to the level. The skateboard has a moderate swing and execution speed. Weapon Society plays almost identically to Jacket from the first game with the default mask, and is very straightforward in how he plays and handles. Regarding his list of total victims in his short appearance, he kills 40 gang members and 3 enemy dogs. He has a minimum body count of 43, but he possibly has numerous hits on the enemies of the Russian Mafia too, so while the absolute minimum we know of is 43, it could easily be well over 50. Personally, I'm gonna guess about 75 or up to 100 or greater. And with that, now to cover the story of the Henchman. On November 18th, 1991, the Son talks to the Henchman of his plans to start a war with the Colombians. The Henchman questions this because he knows about their small numbers, and the Son replies that the Colombians are actively growing in influence and they're never going to be this weak again as they are right now. After this, the Son goes into and clears out a Colombian-run strip club and claims it for the Russians. The Henchman in the outro to this is noticeably not celebrating and says he's going home to his girlfriend Mary. The Son comments that she's done a number on his personality and that a real man doesn't need to rely on women to live his life, concluding it with the quote, "The minute you get attached to someone you know you're fucked," end quote. He also comments that Mary's too good for him and will come to her senses one day. However, he backs off and lets him go, giving him some money to get his girl something nice, which the Henchman takes and leaves. Moving on to the events of November 21st of the same year, the Henchman finally approaches his boss and breaks his desire to get out of the business to the Son, saying that he's soft and that he feels he won't last much longer, and that he's been having dreams. The Son immediately lets him go but gives him one last job, clearing out a gang-controlled chop shop, the same one that Andy works at, who will be mentioned later, which has recently defected to the Colombians. As a parting gift, the Son also gives the Henchman a free sample of the new product, a powerful psychoactive drug in a purple and green pill form, similar to the colours of the father's house and the alien plants in Hawaii, as to, and I quote, spice up his new boring lifestyle he's chosen, end quote. For context, the alien plants are a purely aesthetic thing seen in the Hawaii levels of Hotline Miami 2. They're referred to as alien plants because that's what the game's sprite files call them. Anyway, moving on. After taking the pills, the Henchman proceeds to his Fiat past the Son's more expensive Firebird to drive to the chop shop. The entrance to this chop shop noticeably has the word die spray painted onto the old husk of a dead car, which sort of parallels how the Henchman feels like he isn't going to last much longer. Those running the place have also set up skateboard ramps near the entrance, and you also have the option of picking up a skateboard and using it to beat them to death as you find it just when you enter the building. But anyway, the Henchman enters the building with a silenced pistol and clears it out. The chop shop is also full of expensive cars, all of which would clearly be out of the Henchman's price range and reach. Making his way through, he finally finishes off a worker loading a Colombian payment into a blue bag, heads out and bumps into Andy, who he decides to spare, after a brief conversation. For a bit of context on Andy, he's first alluded to in the outro to Moving Up on December 2nd, as a chop shop worker who Ash mentions who also owes him a favour, Tony being told to take the van to him for repairs. Anyway, after the Henchman heads home to his girlfriend Mary, who is watching TV and has made dinner, which he was late for and is now in the fridge. He then proceeds to explain to his girlfriend the situation of how he's out of the business, which sort of worries Mary, and he heads upstairs to bed. His house overall is comfortable but not affluent. Like, he's got a gym in there, he's got a pretty nice place, but it's not like a big rich mansion. Anyway, a newspaper is also open to a story about a Russian family of 5 being burned alive in a recent arson, and that this is a part of a huge wave of anti-Russian hate crimes going on. After this, he kicks the money bag across the tiger pelt rug and under his bed and goes to sleep. In his dream he has a much more expensive car which he drives alone, notably without Mary. And he's listening to the radio which is celebrating fantastic weather and says the station will later debut a new single from Perturbator, a joke about how Sexualizer plays over the next scene. It goes on to elaborate that the next song is by someone called Mitch, but then it cuts off as an emergency weather report indicates a tropical storm is rapidly approaching, which is a joke about an artist known as Mitch Murder. The road then turns into ruins and Richard appears, at which point Richard begins to question him and tells him that without directions, he'll likely end up going in circles and that he's headed for a dead end and knows that. Richard ends the dream by asking Henchman if he forgot to bring his girlfriend. The next day, November 22nd, Henchman wakes up to find the money bag and his car both gone, with a note left behind for Mary saying he'd do the same, which is probably true if the dream is an indication to go by, which absolutely devastates him. Dejected that the son was correct, he goes to a Russian affiliated drug den, devours all the pills the son gave him, and tries to call Mary or the son, but he's too high to dial the right number. The fans then pull up with a sick drift, attack the building and kill everyone inside, including the incapacitated henchman, likely because he was associated with the Russian mob and straight up was just wearing their uniform anyway, but it's also possible that Andy may have tipped them off to his location, them killing him probably also because of his attack on Andy's chop shop. Plus the fans themselves are war veterans and they went through the same conflict as Jacket, so they're gonna have a predisposition to hating Russians as well. But as they proceed to bash his head in with the drugs having numbed his pain, he talks the entire time the fans are killing him. He asks if he needs to go to a hospital, says he wants to go to the jungle, asks them to call Mary, and finally says he just wants to go home before Corey delivers several clumsy blows to his head which kills him, and Ash takes his cell phone. This being where his story ends before the game transitions to the first Hawaiian conflict level. And with his story covered, now he can actually talk about his characterization. Throughout his brief story, it's very clear that he's getting old and he no longer wants to do this anymore. Primarily because he has people he cares about and he's got enough money to finally get away from there, but things don't go according to plan and he gets devastated, and just like Richard the Chicken warned him, he ended up in a dead end, getting his head caved in by Corey. But we do know that the henchman has a level of humanity as he was very willing to spare Andy. But ultimately, while the bodyguard lacks a noticeable amount of character but does have some, he does a lot of things for the plot and we're now going to go over them. First being, he provides exposition. He shows us how the Russian mafia generally operates from within, allows us to know about the pills before the son goes on his rampage in Apocalypse, setting them up as a plot device. He gives us a view into what makes someone in the Russian mafia work for them and what drives them, sorta gives us an idea of what their lives are like, while also acting as a way to humanize the enemies we've been killing for a game and a half now, but not so much that you feel bad for all of them. Giving him a girlfriend shows a human side to him in a very simple and effective way, which provides a nice contrast to the cold, calculated assassin we see him be in his one level. He spares one of his former co-workers, Andy, who was uninvolved with the Colombians, running the chop shop as he just works there, showcasing a level of humanity. Him doing it for the money to support his girlfriend adds another layer of humanity, albeit this is too contrasted by the dream in which he leaves without his girlfriend and where Richard mysteriously appears to question him on it. Richard himself being worthy of a whole video on his own. Then the human side is amplified by his girlfriend leaving and him breaking down and resorting to taking hard drugs to cope with it, him dialing the wrong number as he tries to call someone. And finally, his story comes to an end in a violent but fitting manner for Hotline Miami, with him dying horribly at the hands of the fans while rambling about animals and his girlfriend. And with that, that's what he exists to do for the game's plot. In summary, he provides necessary plot exposition, and a way to humanize the enemies we've been going against. But with that, now I'm going to list off some complaints I have about the character. Firstly, I feel like his reason for quitting would hit harder if we had a level beforehand which gives us an elaboration on his reasons, that being him going soft. Maybe something along the lines of his girlfriend getting kidnapped after a hit gone wrong and she's being used as a hostage, and him having to rescue her but having to make a difficult choice in the process of some kind. And another complaint is I feel like he needs more actual characterization. Perhaps more time or dialogue with his girlfriend would have helped. And lastly, I feel like overall, he's more a playable plot device than he is an actual character. Like, don't get me wrong, he definitely has some nice characterization, but I just feel like more could have been done with him. Like, as far as the plot is concerned, he doesn't really do much. He more or less just exists to provide exposition and humanizing the enemies, and that's pretty much it, with a little bit of characterization sprinkled in. And with that, that's pretty much all there is to say about the Henchman. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you around. Goodbye.